Hi, we're here at the Margaretville Hospital, where we have the new ambulance being dedicated to the hospital by auxiliary members. Right now we're getting a demonstration by Charlene of some of the lights. The cost of this ambulance is $50,000, was raised by dedicated members of the community through the hospitality shop, the thrift shop, the miniature show, the antique show, flea market, and by private donations. We have Tom Smith right here. Tom, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine.
We just listened to your speech. In brief, could you tell us a little bit about the ambulance squad and the auxiliary?
Well, the ambulance squad, as I stated in my speech, was formed on May 15th, 1967. And it was a result of legislation being passed in 1966 that said that funeral directors could no longer transport patients or accident patients. The Margaretville Memorial Hospital at that time, the governing board, they made the decision that something had to be done in our service area. So they formed a committee, and the chairman of that committee at that time was Bob Hill. There was Douglas Faulconer and Francis Sweeney. They went out and explored what can be done to furnish our area with this type of a service. They did an excellent job.
And you've been the chairman for how long?
I have been chairman now for 5 years. Prior to me, in the 17 years of existence, there were two other chairmen, and that was Francis Sweeney and Robert Hill.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. And who gets the first ride? Are you the first driver?
I'll drive it, but I don't want to ride.
Too many buttons for you to handle in there?
Correct. It's quite complicated, but yet it's quite a piece of equipment.
Looks like an airplane inside there.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We can handle any emergency.
Okay, there you are with Tom Smith. We're here with Margaret Duggan right now. Hi, Margaret. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you, Christine?
Could you tell us a little bit about what the auxiliary has done to raise, I believe it was $18,000 was your share?
Well, no, that was just the thrift shop.
Just the thrift shop.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And we had a very successful miniature show last year, which contributed. And our annual flea market is a good moneymaker, which is coming up the 4th of August this year. Mm-hmm. And we have a hospitality shop in the hospital, which also made quite a sum of money. And we sent letters to those who had used the ambulance formerly, and we raised quite a bit of money that way. And we made the $50,000 in just under a year.
That's quite a feat that you've done. What's your next project?
The board has to approve of one.
Uh-huh.
Right now we have a grandfather's clock on raffle, and they're $1 a piece, and we hope that that will be the start of our next. Each department is asking for something, but it's up to the board to decide what we
Good luck in
money.
your future endeavors.
Thank you.
Best to you.
Thank you.
This is Christine Cordone from behind the Margaretville Hospital in the hospital garden. Thank you.
Go ahead. Good afternoon. This is Michael Finberg with WARK, and here with me in the studio is Mr. Cyrus Schoonmaker, who is the Republican County Chairman and in fact has been for the last 16 years. He is also the Delaware County Treasurer, and he'll be one of 3 delegates from the 25th Congressional District to attend the Republican Convention in a few weeks in Dallas. Mr. Schoonmaker, welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
I'd like to ask you first your views of having a woman as candidate for the vice presidency now of the United States with Mrs. Ferraro.
Well, I think it's fine to have a woman as a vice presidential candidate and as a vice president. I think that when you are considering a woman, you should do the same as you would a man for the presidency. Mm-hmm. I think that woman should have the capacity to serve as president.
Certainly.
and I think that is important. I assume we're going to be a little partisan this afternoon because I am the Republican chairman, and I can think of some women in the Republican Party that would make excellent vice presidential choices and would have the capacity to serve as president. One being our Supreme Court Justice, Sandra, Anne Armstrong, the former ambassador, I believe, to England, Jean Kirkpatrick,
the UN,
the ambassador to the UN, and so on.
One of the statements made by Vice President Mondale has been that he sees it, because of the deficit and the economic situation in the United States, that it will be necessary for the next president, whoever is elected, to actually raise taxes to help support both the economy and to start offsetting the deficit, which is growing. President Reagan has claimed that that will not be necessary. What are your views, in your capacity certainly as treasurer and as Republican chairman, about those statements by Mr. Mondale and, of course, by Mr. Reagan?
I think there's no question that we have to get the deficit cut back. It's growing too fast. But you will remember that the president has cut personal income tax in his first term, 25%, which was most important in the recovery of the economy. Now, as the economy recovers, the tax should pick up as people make more money, corporations make more money, and so I don't think that it will be absolutely necessary for President Reagan to raise taxes. I think he might better look at cutting his budget and coming in with a balanced budget and start to pay off some of the deficit.
So your view is, as corporations and individuals make more money, even with the tax cut, therefore they'll be paying more taxes, and as you see it at the moment, that will be sufficient without having to increase either personal or corporate tax?
Along with some cuts in the budget.
And what areas of the budget would you personally like to see cut somewhat, or in what priorities?
Well, I still think there's some room for cuts in social programs. I think a long look at the defense budget. There could be some cuts there. However, I don't want you to misinterpret me, because I believe in a strong national defense. But I think there can be some cuts there.
As far as the social programs go, one of the issues among many Americans, of course, is the status of the Social Security system as a whole. Your views about that?
Well, I don't think there's any question that you have to maintain the Social Security system. It's been set up for a long time. Our people have paid into it. They're entitled to their retirement. And I think it's a must. It may be that in order to balance it, as an insurance company would do, you may have to raise the rates, which they have done.
Yes.
But I don't think you should be cutting the benefits, because people have worked their lifetime and expect that check for their retirement. And it's just like if I said to you, you don't have to pay any Social Security, but I want to see you save enough so that when you get to be 65, you have enough money invested that you can live out your lifetime. And I think this is very important.
In your view, should there be something for those people who, over their working life, have set aside money or contributed to their Social Security fund, should there be some factor built in to keep the amount of benefit up with inflation, since many of these people have this as either a sole or certainly a major portion of their retired income?
Well, I think that inflation has to be taken into consideration. But you'll remember that during this administration, inflation has gone down considerably.
Mm-hmm.
And you're now at a 4 to 5% inflationary factor. But to answer your question, the answer is yes. I think you have to take into consideration inflation.
Okay. One of the items making news at the moment has been the Republican Party platform. There have been congressional hearings by Senators Weicker, Hatfield, and Mathias to have some hearings and have some input from members of Congress about the planks of the Republican platform. And I understand this is an ad hoc committee, as you pointed out in our earlier discussion. The process of actually developing the Republican platform, what is that process? And your views, please, on the ad hoc committee's desire for input.
Well, the process is that the National Committee, the chairman of the National Committee, has appointed a resolutions committee, platform committee. And they have been holding hearings around the states throughout the nation. And they are putting together the platform. Now, Senator Weicker and Mathias Hatfield, as I told you before, are an ad hoc committee.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no secret that they are representative of the liberal wing of the party. And they are trying to get some input into the platform. I would suggest to them that they do it in the proper procedure and appear before the platform committee just as anyone else has to do.
Mm-hmm. As a delegate, are there some specific planks that you are looking forward to or anticipating relative to foreign policy, the economy?
Yes. And very importantly, I am looking to the plank on agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It's no secret that I disagree with the president on the milk tax.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because my people have to pay that. And I think that the whole agricultural program has to be looked at. Because if they're going to subsidize the grain growers in the West, where the strong farm bloc is, they must also make some provision for the farmers in the East and the dairy people
mm-hmm.
that have to buy that grain. And if they're going to sell the grain to Russia, that's fine, only let's not do it so it raises the price to the dairy farmers
mm-hmm.
and the poultry farmers.
You, as a delegate, will be going to Dallas in a number of weeks. You mentioned that you're going to drive out and visit some family on the way.
Yes.
What highlights are you looking forward to at the convention, and what are you anticipating as part of the whole process of spending a week with your colleagues from all over the country?
Well, always one of the biggest highlights of the convention is the keynote speech. I'm looking forward to that. That's usually on Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
The convention is for 4 days. And usually Monday is for the keynote speaker and the organization of the convention. Tuesday is the platform. Wednesday, the vice presidential nomination, and then, or the presidential nomination. Thursday, the vice presidential nomination, and then the speeches, the acceptance speeches by the president and the vice president.
Mm-hmm. And have you attended other Republican conventions, Mr. Schoonmaker?
Yes, I was a delegate at large in 1976 to Kansas City,
mm-hmm.
and that was, of course, a little more exciting because President Ford had a contest with Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
And we at that time were supporting Gerald Ford.
Mm-hmm. As an individual at the convention, What are some of the feelings among the masses on the floor? How is the actual communication, either within the New York State delegation or within our own? How about some of those logistics? Those of us that watch are certainly impressed with the number of people and with the organization, but how does it feel to be one of those participants on the floor?
Well, it's quite exciting, and of course in '76 it was a little more exciting for the New York delegation. The Vice President, Nelson Rockefeller, led the delegation, and at that time we had the governor, Malcolm Wilson, and Senator Javits, and Senator Buckley. Mm-hmm. And so that made it more exciting just with those people there. But just a little anecdote to that convention. I don't know if you watched it or not, but North Carolina sat right in front of us. Mm-hmm. And they had their rebel hats on, and the Vice President was having a great time with them. They had little corn squeezins and so on. And he happened to take one of the signs. He was fooling with them. Well, the Nevada delegation sat across the aisle, and they got all excited and ran over and pulled out the telephone, and each delegation has a phone. And Rosenbaum was the state chairman at the time, and he sat on the end where the telephone is. Well, they got in a little hassle. The Secret Service ran in to protect the Vice President, and he said, "There's nothing wrong, I was just fooling," and mm-hmm. But they took him right out. And of course that was on nationwide television. Right. But that made it exciting. Exciting. The other thing that made it exciting, or a little exciting, was to see Louis Lefkowitz wear a rebel hat from mm-hmm. North Carolina.
The differences between Vice President Mondale and President Reagan, of course, will determine the election and how convincing each of the party candidates are in convincing the people that their ideas are right. As the Republican chairman, what do you see as the major differences between Vice President Mondale and President Reagan?
Oh, I think there's a big difference. I think that people have a real choice this year. President Reagan is a conservative type president, and through his conservatism has brought the economy back, done a good job. And on the other hand, you have Vice President Mondale, who wants to go back to the old way of spend, 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 and the liberal ideas, and beef up the social programs and so on and so forth. Look at your unemployment rate, how it has dropped. And it hasn't dropped by spending money on welfare. It has dropped because the president has brought the economy back, and people are going back to work. And so I think there's a very distinct choice between the two parties, the two men, and the people in this country have to decide which route they wish to take.
Mm-hmm. In the area of foreign policy, with President Reagan, we find ourselves supporting guerrillas in one country in Central America and supporting the government in a neighboring country. We found that with the peacekeeping force in Lebanon, unfortunately, American lives were lost. Your views about Mr. Reagan's foreign policy?
Well, basically, the world is at peace with the exception of Iran and Iraq. And I think that's a plus. I think he has helped to keep the peace by some of his actions. I personally disagree with the Lebanon thing. I think if you're going to send troops in, you got to send them in for a purpose. And certainly I don't want to see another Vietnam where we're just fighting for the sake of fighting. It's a no-win situation. And I think we've got to stay out of those situations. So I disagreed on Lebanon, but the deal in Grenada, I support that wholeheartedly. And those kind of actions, I think, are good. You remember Teddy Roosevelt with his big stick, and I think once in a while you have to use the big stick.
Very good. Well, thank you. Have a good trip out to the convention. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
This is Michael Finberg. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the Republican convention. Thank you. This is Michael Finberg with WARK TV, and I'm here with Joan LaCosta, who's one of the leaders of the I Can Cope program here in Delaware County. Joan, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate the time you're giving us also for this. We really do.
Thank you. Tell us something a little bit about the I Can Cope program. What does it do, and who is it for?
I Can Cope program is for anyone who has cancer and cancer patients or their families or relatives, and it's a very informative and educational program that we put on. It's an 8-week session.
It runs for 8 weeks.
8-week session.
One meeting per week.
Right.
Where will these meetings be?
It's going to
Joan?
begin this September 12th at the Arkville Fire Hall on Wednesday nights. It's a Wednesday.
Each Wednesday thereafter?
Right, 8 sessions. We may possibly go 9, but that we'll let people know as we go along.
And then for these sessions, Joan, people can come for any particular one or come for all 8
That's
or 9?
right. There's no compulsory thing. There's no money involved. There's nothing involved. People just come to learn about what they can do, how they can handle their particular problems with the disease. And we have professional people come, doctors and nutritionists, and we do have various professional people that come.
Okay, and some aspects of the disease and its relationship on those people affected
That's
would be,
right.
you mentioned nutrition, exercise, what other kinds of things will be discussed?
Relationship to food and the drugs that you may be taking. We have people that tell you about that, and how to eat how to eat in connection with whatever drug you may be taking. And it also tells about chemotherapy and how it affects you, and various aspects of the disease. And
Now, you've already had one 8-week session here in Delaware County
right.
that was successful?
Very successful. We're trying to do it in May and September, and we're trying to get it twice a year because we feel that there are more people that we would hope to reach, and we hope this will reach people and they will feel free to come.
Well, it's certainly a worthy cause. Thank you for your efforts and for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate it.
We'll put on the screen phone numbers of those people that you can call for further information about the I Can Cope program here in Delaware County, which will begin September 12th at the Arkville Fire Hall. Thank you for watching. This is Michael Finberg with WARK TV. We're here at the Upper Lodge at Bellayre Ski Center, where a meeting has been called by Commissioner Williams of the DEC, and he is meeting with the Coalition to Save Bellayre. The meeting has just begun, and it's behind me.
Me is the past president of Rotary Club and executive director of the fire department and executive director of the recreational committee for the village of Fleischmann's. Cindy Becker, to your right, is an anthropologist and educator in New York City. Has a home there. She's an avid skier and former pass holder. Does coalition fundraising, phone network, and events. And Cindy also runs the Fleischmann tennis tournament, which is one of the highlights of the summer season up here in the Catskills. Heinz Pasternak, all right, next, down the end, is also a longtime resident and business person in the area. He's president of the Fleischmann's Chamber of Commerce. He does community liaison work, letter writing, and other campaigns for our coalition. Faye Hurd is the new president of the Shandaken Chamber of Commerce. Where are you, Faye? Okay. Faye is the new president of the Shandaken Chamber of Commerce, which is a rotating member of our coalition. Peg Gale is the former member of the coalition, and she just stepped down after, I believe, 5 years, and Faye is the new president of the Shandaken Chamber of Commerce. She's a resident business owner of the area. She owns the Blue Barn Antique and Gift Shop on Route 28 in Shandaken. Does community work, letter writing, and other, oh, I got the wrong line, I beg your pardon. President of the Shandaken Chamber of Commerce, does much community work. Doris Lampariello can't be here at the moment. She's working this morning. They're busy at the Margaretville Bakery on Route 28. She has been extremely active in all endeavors, particularly in petition drives and fundraising. Corinne Hecker, Corinne over there to your right, former pass holder, former president of the Bellayre Mountain Ski Club, an avid skier from New York City, and an avid skiing family. Harvey Chandler is, Harvey, right next to you there, Vice President of Advertising for MEM, owns second home in Pine Hill, also an avid skier and pass holder, insists in all efforts, particular interest in petition drive and letter writing campaigns, and he had a lot to do with our bumper sticker. George Coster is former owner of the Marathon Enterprises Incorporated, which is a publicly held company. George in the middle there. George is a New Jersey resident and a second home owner here, along with his wife Dorothy, who's also in attendance, who are avid skiers and pass holders. He chaired our petition drive, which got 10,500 signatures, which was very successful. George is the representative of the out-of-state skiers that ski at Bellayre. Milton Hollins, right across from me, is a retired dentist and college professor. Longtime Bellayre mountain skier and activist, is retired up here in the area now. He has been the coordinator of all coalition efforts, handles special activities such as bus trips, hearings, etc. Bert Schoenbach, to my left, is the Legislative Committee Chairman of the coalition. He is the director of the West Bronx Local Development Corporation and also criminal justice consultant to State Senator Israel Ruiz. What's the saying for Israel Ruiz? Buffer Ruiz and Buffer. That's right, okay. That's their legislative campaign. We have Hans Schreck, a new member of the coalition, is a motel owner and manager of Motel and Fleischmann's and vice president of the Fleischmann's Chamber of Commerce. My name is Joe Kelly. I am also a second home owner in the area. I've been up here for about 10 years. I'm the first vice president with Prudential-based Securities. I am also a former chairman of the Village of Rockville Center Environmental and Beautification Committee for the last 5 years. That is our coalition directors. I think I got everybody. I didn't miss anybody, did I? Those are our coalition directors. We cut across political and regional ties. We're 10,500 strong. We are the downstate area as a whole, saying we want our ski area made competitive. We protest its neglect. Bellayre is like another famous resident of the Catskills, Rip Van Winkle. Like Rip, Bellayre has been sleeping for 10 years and has awakened to a world which, because of minuscule capital investment, it cannot compete in. Millions have been spent in other ski areas, both public and private, during this period, on marketing, trail development, and snowmaking, while Bellayre was ignored. Little did we know when Lake Placid was chosen for the site of the Olympics in 1978 that it signaled a massive infusion of state winter recreation money into the North Country, which continues right into the current fiscal year, with a doubling of Order's budget to over $16 million, according to the Lake Placid News, a figure which Senator Carol Berman of the 9th District viewed as shocking. According to our calculations, and they are open to some possible error, but as far as we can see, the money spent on Lake Placid and the Order and the Lake Placid Olympic Organizing Committee was $32 million in preparation for the Olympics, which we, I think, as a coalition were for. And as probably not as a coalition because we weren't in existence, but I'd say that the people here were for the Olympics at Lake Placid. We were for the $32 million. Since then, however, $6 million in 1980 to bail out the Lake Placid Olympic Organizing Committee. and $26 million, excluding return revenues, since then, in an area which for the majority of New York State's citizens is very difficult to reach. We also question the value of maintaining a luge run and ski jumps and bobsled runs when our mountain, Bellayre, is starved for funds. This is not Olympic Regional Development Authority money. This is New York State purposes funding, which has been spent again in an area virtually out of geographical accessibility to the majority of the state's population, in an area that caters basically 60% to Canadians, not New York State citizens. We as downstate citizens sincerely question the allocation of winter recreation money in New York State for the last 10 years and want it changed. Essex County is not the only rural area of New York State which requires seed money for economic development. Bellayre is in a region with much natural beauty and a rich cultural heritage, but very poor in current economic development. The area is virtually void of any major state-run tourist facilities to draw people to this area or to keep them when they arrive. Bellayre is a major attraction, albeit only opened 4 months of the year, and it has been an orphan as far as state funding goes. Capital investment, we believe, is the bedrock of any operation, public or private, and without it, the operation crumbles. This region is mandated by the Constitution, the New York State Constitution, to support 260,000 acres of forest preserve lands and many more acres of for New York City watershed purposes. It should also be a reciprocal obligation in New York State to give it the means to provide economic opportunity for the citizens of this area in order to earn a decent living. Bellayre, as we have said before, is the linchpin of the economic obligation, and it has to prosper year-round for this area to prosper. Keep in mind the family median income of the immediate geographical area surrounding Bellayre is 40% below the statewide average. In conclusion, we feel that, one, snowmaking, trail development, and marketing make a ski area. Bellayre has been lacking all three in a highly competitive market. Two, the state monies provided for winter recreation have been siphoned off to the North Country away from the state's major population area. Three, the antiquation of the area has been caused by deferred maintenance and lack of capital funding. The state has let its investment become run down. We feel funding can save it and bring it back. Our recommendations are the pace of number one, the pace of the original unit management plan is too slow and not imaginative enough. It was also more concerned with the health of trees than the health of skiers. Bellayre is an intensive use area and should be looked upon as such. We feel also that more attention must be paid to how the unit management plan will be funded. On paper is nice, but in place is better. Two, snowmaking is totally inadequate and must be brought up to industry standards for Bellayre to compete in this competitive ski environment. Three, the facility is only utilized for 4 months out of 12. It is a waste of a great natural resource and leaves idle a potentially valuable summer tourist draw. We feel summer operation is a must. We have a proposal here that Bert's going to get into a little in more detail. But this is an aerial view of Bellayre. This is the current section right here with the novice area in the top and the intermediate expert area in the top, with Pine Hill right down here. We feel that some kind of a study should be initiated or some kind of plans be made to utilize this pole, because Bellayre is right now using maybe 60% of what is mandated in the Constitution. We would like for the New York State to explore, for two reasons, trails down into Pine Hill, whether it's down into here to the lake, down and continuing along the Cathedral Brook into the village. And Bert will get in a little bit more of that. I don't want to take his time away, but there's two purposes that we have for making this suggestion. Number one, and I think most important, is the This will revive a village economy that has been depressed for 20 or 30 years by making it the only lift-served ski village in the Northeast. This community presently is contemplating disbanding its village status because it can't afford to pay its volunteer fire department. That's the kind of situation we're dealing with. I think the figures are $4,000 or $5,000, and the village is having some difficulties with the money. Maybe not, that isn't the only reason the difficulties are coming, but it brings out the point that here is a village that has a tremendous amount of potential that is right below, in the shadow of Bellayre, has been bypassed by Route 28, but we have the perfect opportunity to bring a viable industry back and revive this village. Ulster County has estimated that Bellayre is worth almost $12 million in revenue to the surrounding area. In this economically depressed area, that number, the $12 million, not only provides the state with approximately $800,000 in tax revenue, but also provides employment to people who otherwise wouldn't have jobs. And B, the second reason for this proposal, it would instantly transform Bellayre back to its former reputation as one of the premier ski facilities in the Northeast by virtue of the both vertical drop and also the length of the ski trails. As you can see here, the length of the ski trails at Bellayre, one of the problems that the skiers have at Bellayre is the shortness of these trails. If we could snake some around here, whether it's this way or this way, with what Bert is going to be discussed later, is something that we feel should be explored. I'd just like to point out that while we're on the subject, here is Heinlein. Notice the difference. Now this is a relatively modern-day ski area, and notice the difference between the width of the ski trails here and the width of the ski trails at Bellayre. We're mandated by the Constitution, and we are willing to live within that, the spirit and the letter of the law, but just as a matter of what modern day ski technology is the width of the trails, and this is for safety's sake. I think more so than just the fact that better skiing, I think it's for safety. Number 5, the state and the DEC, we feel, should become less apologetic for the existence of Bellayre and promote it for what it is, a great natural resource of New York State. It is one of the few, and this is something that my wife has brought up a number of times, and I know Governor Cuomo is very concerned with. It's one of the few family-oriented facilities left for struggling young families of downstate New York. They can ski at Bellayre. Now we're talking about the metropolitan area and the surrounding areas, really all the way up to Albany. They can ski at Bellayre for a reasonable lift ticket price without necessitating an expensive weekend stay at a resort. Bellayre is within day trip distance of more New York State citizens by far than really any other public or private ski area in New York State. As we said in our letter to Michael Del Giudice, our coalition will continue to press for fair New York State treatment of the downstate skier and the Catskill and Hudson Valley regions. Mr. Commissioner, we do sincerely appreciate your interest, and we hope that this renewed examination of Bellayre and its effect on the entire downstate region will spur a more equal share of recreational revenues for the southern area. We feel a fair and objective reassessment of this administration's position will work in our favor. Our region really deserves better, and we are going to demand better. Bert, do you have some things that you'd like to point out here?
All right. First of all, I'd also like to thank you, Commissioner, for meeting with us, and perhaps this will be the beginning of an end to the problems that we've had, and hopefully a new day in the expansion dreams of all of us. I'd just like to start off with a few formal remarks and then go into our proposal for the Pine Hill expansion. The vast wilderness of the Catskill Park, combined with New York City watershed lands, may be an ecological plus for our state, but unfortunately it has contributed to the economic impoverishment of the Catskill region. These lands in their present form provide little economic benefit to the people of the immediate area. We therefore believe the state has an obligation to help revitalize this region, and in doing so provide economic benefits to the state as well. We further believe this can be achieved without upsetting the park's ecological and environmental balance. The development of the Catskill region has long been discussed, but never fulfilled. Legislation creating the Catskill Park Regional Economic Development Commission is being prepared for introduction in the next legislative session. The Bellayre Ski Center would be the keystone, if not the centerpiece, for the economic and environmental renaissance of this long-forgotten sleeping giant. Because of the proximity to the 17 million people of the New York metropolitan area and the 7.7 million people of New York City, the Bellayre Ski Center must be developed into the major ski center it so richly deserves. Expansion of its trails to the village of Pine Hill would give Bellayre an 1,800-foot vertical drop. It would make it competitive with the more celebrated ski areas of New England and go a long way in aiding the economy of the Catskill region as well as the state. More skiers would be attracted to its trails instead of Vermont, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Its snow-making capability must be increased immediately, as well as its other physical needs, merely to make it equal to its present competitors. In conclusion, while the governor, to his credit, and response to the 10,000 signature petition placed Bellayre back in the budget, we must now see that it is properly funded so that the people of both the city and the state of New York can be drawn to it with obvious economic and recreational benefits accruing to the region. Commissioner, we prepared this talking paper for you, and in it we have, on the cover, is a gondola. I would like to have said, and maybe in some day in the near future, put down the Pine Hill tram. It's obviously a tram that's in place in Europe. But in it, in this talking paper, we have put down a number of alternatives and facts and figures. Some of these facts and figures, to punctuate what I said formally, I think can be summed up on page 51, and it's kind of sad. There are three main towns in the Catskill Park: Denning, Hardenburg, and the town we're in now, Shandaken. There were more people in these three towns in 1900 than there are today. And I think that's what really sums it up. I don't want to bore you with the details. You can read them at your leisure, but...
Say the same thing for New York City, Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse?
Well, then we have to go to the next page, which is the median income. If we talk that, then we have to go to the state median income of $20,000, and the combined village of Pine Hill, Denning, Hardenburg, Shandaken is $13,000. If we want per capita income, the state is at $7,500, Ulster County $6,700, town of Shandaken $5,700, and the village of Pine Hill $4,900. I think it's, you know, I have an advantage. I work in probably the worst ghetto in the country, if not the state of New York, the South Bronx. And as I said to you in our remarks several weeks ago, there are unfortunate similarities between the two areas, except that we're more green and they have some more people, but they're both impoverished areas. But there's a difference. I am familiar with the funding mechanisms that have been pumped into the South Bronx, millions of dollars. Nothing has been done for these people. I don't believe my neighbors want a handout. They want a helping hand. And I'm fully, well, if you look at some of these pictures, here, here's an example of the Pine Hill Hotel.
Which Bob can influence you.
Yeah. They've renovated it. It's doing business in spite of the problem. Right next door is the problem. It's abandoned, it's disheveled. You have a plus and you have a minus. As opposed to the area where I work, where it's all impoverished, here there's hope, not hopelessness. And this area, the Bellayre Ski Center, is really not a ski center for us. It's the, as our chairman says, the linchpin. I call it a catalyst for change. This is an economic plan, and we see this as a potential 12-month boost. If we had tennis courts and golf courses, if we had recreational water, which could be achieved here, in the hopeful acquisition of this area, a lake. We don't have recreational water.
What is that area now?
That was a lake years ago. The dam broke. I think it made the front page of the New York Times back in the early 60s. Through a flood. It's never been repaired, and obviously there is no lake there now with weeds. So, just looking at this map, and if I can address you 1 minute, I was in John Johnson's office about a week and a half ago, and the map is on his desk. It's really a photographic facsimile of this area. And I saw a golf course programmed into the bottom. I said, well, where is that? It was never built. And we have the same thing down at the Ken Wilson State Park. In other words, the plans were here, never fulfilled. What we're saying is, if we can make a capital investment, we're not looking for subsidies. And I'm sure there are areas such as Jones Beach, and I don't have those figures at hand, but I believe there's a subsidy here. We're not looking for subsidies. We're looking for capital investment in which to turn a profit. This is a straight business venture. We're so close to the major market of this country, if not the region. People want to come here, and they don't know about it. If we can develop this area, we can show a profit. Not that that's essential, but we can certainly act, at least catalytically, in reviving this truly sleeping zone. Commissioner, we're not looking for a hand, just a helping hand.
We think that, I mean, as far as Pine Hill goes, the chairlift goes into Pine Hill, and Pine Hill becomes a, if not a mecca for skiing, probably at least the center of the Northeast for skiing. Now, Commissioner, we're definitely going to give you a chance to speak, but we thought we'd, some of the members of our coalition also wanted to say a few things, formal remarks, and you can say whatever you would like to say, and then we'll have a table discussion. Our Vice Chairman Al Higley had a Vice Chairman Al Higley had a couple of remarks which he'd like to start.
I'd like to talk about the double standards taking place in the state right now regarding the border.
You want to say it?
I'd like to continue the informal nature. This is one winter I'm here. I should say this is not the first time I've been here. Since I've been commissioner, I've only been commissioner a little over a year. This is my 5th visit. All of them somewhat official. Official in the sense that I've been here to talk with the employees about their concerns. I've been here to talk with other people about their interests. This is really the first time that we've focused upon the development of Bellayre in the way that it was originally intended. I think that the comments that have been made so far reflect a substantial amount of the frustration and anger that has characterized this place over the past several years, particularly on the part of all those people who see in Bellayre not only a significant neighbor and a sleeping giant, but more importantly, something that has all the makings of being something that is dead. And I can understand your frustration and anger. That's why we want to focus as much as we can upon the positive. We want to focus on the future. We want to focus on the upbeat. As I said, I've only been in this particular business. I've been in Albany for a long time, in government for a long time. But I've only been in this role and had this kind of responsibility over a year. What has happened in the past has happened in the past. The thing we have to do is let's look at the future. That's why I directed Ron to focus on the unit management plan and directed him to say, let's put together a draft, let's have a hearing, and let's move fast on this. See, what we could have done is follow the normal bureaucratic approach, spend forever in massaging something called the unit management plan, and then have the hearing in the draft, and been killed anyway. I said, let's put something on a piece of paper, let's go out to the public, and let's get all these comments. And as a result, the kind of response that Dr. Hollins made, Hollins or Hollis?
Hollins, H-O-L-L-I.
Because in the other material it says Hollis, and the newspaper called you Hollis, right?
I know.
Right.
They got my picture right, though.
In your comments. Your comments, right, too. But the comments made by Dr. Hollins at the hearing was a tangible reflection of the anger and frustration that you've all experienced. But at the same token, we've taken all those comments. Now what we have to do is put together a unit management plan that will come back to you and say, this is the document that will be the kind of statement, the kind of charter that we want. If we fail at that, now you got a good reason to complain. But initially, I'm sure that the unit management plan, a lot of people were concerned by saying, well, it didn't do this, it didn't do that. It was, some people said it was woefully inadequate. We knew all that would happen. But one thing was sure, and that is that now we have brought the parties in a point where we can now focus upon something and chart out the kind of direction we want to chart. Second point, I think is very important, and that is that the charter that we lay forth must be one that is bold, substantial. It responds to the kind of concerns that were mentioned here today. Not only that Bellayre is a ski facility, but rather, as somebody said, Bellayre can be the keystone of overall economic development in this part of the world. And that's what the unit management plan must reflect. Not concerned about the cost. Because if we were to gauge the unit management plan on the basis of how much it costs, we would have a peanut. What we've got to do is to say, this is what the whole thing can be. This is what it can be in terms of the development of Pine Hill. This is what it can mean in terms of the utilization of the railroad. This is what it can mean in terms of the access via Route 28. This is what it can mean in terms of all of these other elements. Now that's going to cost a number that is far beyond our immediate ability to identify. But the task then, you see, is to say, let's scope that out. Let's figure how we're going to get those costs. Let's see who is going to contribute. Let's see how we can do it. We cannot set up a plan on the basis of how much it costs, because then, you see, we'll be guided by the short term rather than by the long-term opportunities. I think if we have a plan, and the plan says that this is something that we can utilize this resource in a way that will serve in the economic development functions you've identified, as well as providing for the kind of attraction that George and Corinne's family have found in this place, then we can have something that is worthwhile. At the same time, I think that if you have something that is grand in scope without being able to show how you're going to move toward the attainment of that grandness, it all becomes an exercise in not only futility, it becomes also somewhat an exercise of a sham. Therefore, we've got to say that in the short run, we've got to show how we're going to achieve some of these key initial objectives, and to be able to put the money in place to show that what we invest we can follow through on. This calls, of course, for a very strong relationship with the community. I've been trying to promote in other sections of the state ways in which we can utilize our enormous resources in New York State in cooperation with the local governments that are involved. For example, in the shores of Lake Ontario, over the past several years, New York State and the federal government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the construction of sewage treatment facilities. And as a result, Lake Ontario now is a water that is fairly clean. We spent lots of money in killing the lamprey that now makes it possible for great fish to thrive. We spent a lot of money in building fish hatcheries and putting the fish in this lake. As a result, Lake Ontario is now a world-class fishery. People from all over the world come to Lake Ontario, and they get, I was out in Wisconsin in the governor's conferences yesterday. They were going on the muskie hunt, and this little place called Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, has been sanctioned, been received support of the U.S. Congress, labeling this little town in Wisconsin as the muskie capital of the world. I couldn't believe it, because the muskies they were showing were ones that are minimum size. It even Chautauqua Lake. Like, what are you guys doing? But you know, they're really promoting that up there, and the three Upper Lake governors were there, and they were having a good time with the muskies and all the rest, but they're promoting it. What I've been trying to do is to work with the mayors and the supervisors of those little towns on the shores of Lake Ontario and say, look, if you're not smart, and if you don't provide for the kind of zoning, the kind of direction that's necessary to be consistent with the growth that's going to occur there, what's going to happen? What you're going to have is, first of all, a bunch of saloons. You're going to have a bunch of bait shops. You're going to have a bunch of gas stations, some cheap motels, and the fifth thing, you're going to have a disaster. And once a disaster occurs, there's no way to change it. That's why it's important to think in terms of the development of Pine Hill as a cooperative venture between the state, localities, business, whoever else can be involved, so that as the state says, we will move in Pine Hill Lake, I should tell you that we have already signed the necessary documents to proceed with the acquisition of that Pine Hill Lake area. So that area you're pointing to is not a phantom, that will be a reality. 56 acres has already signed the papers. But unless, and this is what I'd conceive, and this is what the unit management plan should try to do. So that we in effect say, we'll take a step, you take a step. You meaning the locality. So we say, we'll buy the lake. Okay, you enact a zoning ordinance that says that you're not going to allow a lot of junk in Pine Hill. We'll put in the trail, and you do something that provides to assure that you're going to have a pretty picture, that you're going to have something that's like an aspen. Because I'm telling you, if you don't, you're going to have the attraction, and you're going to have the immediate response. The immediate response is junk. And once you have junk, you'll never change it. But the opportunity to change Pine Hill into an aspen of the east is present. And that's why we got to work very closely together. And we'll do is we'll say that the unit management plan will endeavor to address the way whereby that can occur. We'll have some kind of a local, some kind of a board or body or some kind of a commission or something that will make it possible for local officials, people such as members of the coalition with a vital stake in this area, local business people, and the state can work together to say, how are we going to proceed hand in glove? That is part of the unit management plan that deals with the organizational process of the whole business. No question we have to have a capital outlay. As commissioner, I can do two things. One thing I can do is to lay out a scheme and say this scheme is one that is worthy. And this scheme is going to cost something. And I can put that something in my budget. And then I can do the second thing. And the second thing is I can advocate it. And I can draw the words and pictures in ways that will be attractive to the legislature and the governor. But I can only do those two things. This is where the cooperation with the legislative leaders, Maurice Hinchey, as you know, has been most supportive of the whole idea. People such as yourself, the coalition, then have to be on board to move along those kind of capital outlays. I think the importance of recognizing reality of fiscal circumstances is something that we won't ignore. At the same time, I think that your anger regarding the investments in the North, while somewhat inaccurate and ill-founded, nevertheless is a reality. What we can do is to say, we got to, and you can play that. You can play that and say, hey, look, there has been lots of money spent here. Equity suggests now that we spend some money there. And we can focus on that direction. Let me just say parenthetically, and really not to, I don't want to dwell upon what has occurred in the past, because really the best way I can proceed is to put my money where my mouth is and say I'm going to do the best I can to take care of things from 1983 on forward. That's why we are taking some immediate steps. That's why we did put the unit management plan already on the table. That's why we've gained 6 months in following that process. That's why I've directed my executive deputy director to sign the necessary papers to proceed with the acquisition of Pine Hill Lake. That's why I'm designating and have designated Bellayre as the information center, as the place for the focus of attention in the Forest Preserve centennial year of 1985 as it relates to the Catskill area. That's already been accomplished. And Bellayre will have a key role in the festivities that relate to the focus upon the Forest Preserve centennial that will occur next year. And this is something that will have national attention. And if we're smart about that, we can include the way in which Bellayre can and should develop as part of that national publicity. After all, the Forest Preserve. I appreciate what you've said about the fact that this vast amount of state-owned land does have a certain amount of economic inhibiting effect. At the same time, it provides also for the framework within which so much of this occurs. But it has something else, and that is that Forest Preserve does have a national audience. A national audience. take that and use it to an advantage that is very important. Should just say parenthetically, and that is that the statistics, the way the newspapers and the media have played the ORTA budget this year is really quite misleading because they focused upon the doubling of the ORTA budget. That has occurred really for a couple of reasons. One is that simply the money that was formerly in this pocket, that was in DEC's pocket to run Gore Mountain, was simply transferred from here to there. And that represented a hunk of cash. A good hunk of cash also was reflected in what is called the rollover money that was in the appropriation budget for the previous year that was continued into the second year. And that amounted to, on paper, what looks like a doubling of the effort. But in terms of the actual cash outlay that ORTA received from the taxpayers of the citizens of New York, it was nowhere near, it was a modest increase, but it was nowhere near any kind of a doubling. Now, there's some other things that are significant, however, and that is that under the arrangements whereby the Olympic Regional Development Authority was established, and I'm the chairman of that, incidentally, and so obviously the way to succeed into the future, I don't believe, is to say we will build Bellayre at the expense of someplace else. Our challenge is to say we will focus and build Bellayre because it ought to be done. But the North Country is also an area of economic distress. You may even recall that Governor Cuomo took some heat because of his characterization of Essex County as the land of the abject poor. But the level of unemployment and the median incomes, were to use those figures, you'd find that the level, even in Essex County, which is the center of Lake Placid, is an area that has been characteristically very difficult in an economic sense. But one thing that you'll find up there, when the Olympic Regional Development Authority was established in the aftermath of the 1980 Olympics, local people were very concerned. State agency coming in here, and they're going to run things, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. They're very anxious about the whole business. But you know what's happened? The cash registers have been jingling like mad in the North Country, in Lake Placid. Monday night, we're going to have a dinner, and the dinner is going to honor the president of the Olympic Regional Development Authority. He's Ed Harkness. He's the guy who runs the day-to-day affairs. We're going to extend his contract. And the initiative for that came from the citizen members of that locality. I was with Ned 2 weeks ago at the opening of the Empire State Games with the governor in Syracuse. And Ned told me that the night before he met with the Board of Supervisors of Warren County. And Warren County, as you know, is the place where Gore Mountain is located. And Ned went to the Board of Supervisors and said, I'm outlining to you a plan, and it's going to cost you, the Board of Supervisors of Warren County, $125,000. You know what that's for? Advertising and promotion. And that is going to complement the program that Ned has outlined for Gore Mountain to develop that in a strong marketing way. So it shows, you see, that by putting the kind of promotion and marketing attention upon that area, the bells will really ring. I was with Ned in Yugoslavia and other people, and I can tell you that that trip and that money was well spent, because just in that trip, being there, I was the only, can you imagine this? I was the only public official currently in office from the United States of America. The Austrians had a big building where everybody was there. The Germans had a great big building where everybody was there. Nowhere did you see the United States flag flying over a particular place, but yet the United States of America had more money in Yugoslavia for the 1984 Olympic Games than anybody else. ABC alone, over $300 million. They had 1,500 staff there at that whole event, and I was the only person and the only public official from New York State. And those dukes and princes and so forth there, boy, all you got to do is say, Commissioner, hey, you know what you're talking about. The result is, you know what the result is? 6 world-class events all signed up for the Olympic Regional Development Facility over the course of the next 2 years. Other events that will deal not with the winter facilities, but with the summer facilities. And all of these are going to mean a lot. This is what we have to do at Bellayre. We're taking the first steps. And the first steps are the awarding of the contracts that Duran may want to tell you more about for the work that's going to go on. We're going to get something underway this building season for the work that has been spent, and we'll focus upon it. So the thing I want to do is to demonstrate on my part, by word and deed, that our emphasis is upon the positive. The emphasis is to do all we can to make Bellayre all that it really can be. And that's what we've got to do. The unit management plan, the annual budget, the acquisition of the lake, the expenditure of the funds that have been appropriated, all these are part of this process. Now, I will even go farther than that. And if, as a result of the unit management plan and the studies that are made of the nature of skiing, the skiing market, calls for a constitutional amendment, even to widen those 80-foot trails, we'll consider that as well. What I'm saying is that we will not close the door on options. What we've got to do is to identify what is necessary to make things happen. Now, of course, nothing is easy. I talk to a lot of people, and there are a lot of people who want the trails not 80 feet, they like them narrower. There are a lot of people who don't want to go to the full 20 miles. They would like to cut it off where it is. And this is something that I appreciate, I respect. I'm solidly in support of the concept of the Forest Preserve. I will do everything I can to ensure that the constitutional concept is maintained. But that, you see, does not deny the opportunities we have to develop something that's here. That's why I'm here. That's the direction that my staff has been given to follow. And we're going to do all we can to make this also a quality mountain that will serve all objectives. Whether or not Bellayre can be a world-class mountain, I don't know. But I think that Bellayre can be a world-class resort area. A world-class resort area where the combination of things, the presence of Pine Hill, the proximity to the metropolitan area, all you have to do is look around and see you've got a world-class facility just by looking out the window. More than you'd find in many sections of the world where the resorts have developed more significantly as a result of advertising and tradition. And if we can take advantage of the railroad, the lake, all these things, I think we can have something very substantial. And that's what we're going to do.
Thank you very much. You know, there comes to mind certain people with vision, and because there hasn't been this linchpin, as Joe would call it, I think of Rudy's, people who have foresight, the restaurant down the road. I mean, that was put up, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. It's contemporary. It's forward-looking. I can see your mentality is forward-looking. Bert and Joe and I, we've talked several times. I don't look in the past. I look at what's ahead of us. Bellayre Mountain, right facing us. Those people were forward-looking people, but it fell apart. It's closed at the top. Beautiful facility. This lady with the blue store, the antique shop. It's a place that you'd expect to see in Vail or in a sophisticated area, but she had foresight. But there's that certain cohesiveness, that certain something that's missing, the linchpin, the middle, where you spread out.
Commissioner, in response to what you said about Essex County, yes, there's no question that we have impoverished areas all over our state, except in this area we don't have to. We are in proximity to a major market area that we can attract very easily with not that big an investment. It's there to be had.
You need an architectural plan, just like when Rudy's was built, Milton Glaser designed that facility, the signs and such. Yes.
Well, I thought that's what we're going to have with the unit management plan. I don't think when you mention order, I don't think we have a problem with order per se or anything that's going on in the North Country. I think I'd equate it more to the Sun Belt and the Frost Belt as far as federal money is gone. When in our states and our federal senators are saying the same thing now, that we've been shortchanged over the years with contracts. And I think when you have a situation whereby there is an area that has $70 million invested in it, and you have an area where there's a minuscule investment, then consequently you're going to have the development in the area where the money goes, and lack of thereof in the other. We don't have a problem with the Olympic Regional Development Authority. We have a problem with inequities of the past. Hopefully, as you say, the inequities in the future will not occur, because we feel that while Bellayre is not a world-class mountain, and it probably never will be a world-class mountain, but it is close to where people can day trip, and where we can make this a facility where those people will be happy to day trip, and it's a lot easier to get to than going up.
And by railroad, where you could get off and go walk over to the mountain. That's long range.
So we just want fair and equitable, and we think that that's the case we're making, and we think that's why we've gotten the response we have, because it hasn't been inequitable. But as you say, we are looking to the future along with you, and we are very happy. I'd say, I think I can speak for the group here, that your attitude, the plans that have set forth, the acquisition of the lake, the positive response to the Pine Hill Bowl concept is all things that we have been looking for, and now that we have you here and that you've given us these assurances that you are going to be, your department is going to be working towards this direction, and I can say, hear, hear, amen, voila.
Could you be able to identify, where does the state cover on this, the Catskill Preserve area? Where does it go down?
You have an ownership map, John? The thing that's important, though, you see, and that is that the road ahead will be tough. It'll be tough in this sense, because there is a back and forth relationship between marketing and having the product delivered. You can make a fantastic marketing campaign, and the people buy the stuff and they say, yuck. So what we've got to do is to make sure that initially we've got something that's fantastic to sell, market it, and keep going back and forth so we can then build on each other as you go back and forth. So unless you're able to deliver on what you're selling, you haven't got anything. On the other hand, unless you can sell what you're delivering.
One should play off the other. Here is the...
Now, John, point out Pine Hill and the lake there, will you?
The Route 28
Everybody see that?
is the line right here. The Pine Hill Lake is the blue spot here, and this is the surveyed area, the 2,000 acres, the intensive use facility for Bellayre Ski Center right here, and its properties. The rest is the forest preserve.
How, Ron, will the lake? See, I understand that we've initiated the proceedings to acquire a 56-acre tract, but in that vicinity.
It's about 20 acres. Let me just
The
put
lake
that
itself.
Yes, it's the lake site.
Right.
Put that in perspective. As most of you know, we were given a $500,000 appropriation this year for snowmaking, to begin expansion of snowmaking. The programming of that money is basically as follows. Around $150,000 for new compressor installations to allow us to expand snowmaking on the mountain. And that contract was, bids were opened on that about 2 weeks ago, right, John, or 3 weeks ago. And most recent conversations with the low bidder indicates that we will have compressors delivered here to the ski center about mid-October. At 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, bids were open on more piping on the mountain, both air and water piping. And it appears, from looking at those bids late yesterday afternoon, that there's sufficient funding to put additional snowmaking on 2 more trails this fall. The engineers are still going through the details of the bid, but everything looks pretty good.
You mean in addition to the ones by the T-bar?
John,
Addition
one
to the ones
across
by
the,
the T-bar?
Would be the T-bar itself and one on each side of the T-bar.
And he said there might be an additional money for 2 more this year.
That would be the 2 trails.
Oh, those would be the 2 trails.
That's correct. Put snowmaking out to the 5/8 T-bar and T-bar itself and the trail on each side. We sell this in big commits.
within that $500,000 also is a small set aside of $20,000 to commence the first phase of acquisition of the Pine Hill Lake site. Now, the purpose of that acquisition at this point is to get into Birch Creek, a larger source of water to support the expanded snowmaking on the mountain. As the Commissioner said, our surveyors began on-the-ground surveys on that site last week. An environmental impact statement is being prepared by staff within the department to address the issue of taking water out of Birch Creek for purposes of pumping it up to the reservoirs on the mountain, again, to support expanded snowmaking. Once the site comes into state ownership, however, I think the stage is set for some of the more visionary things that we've talked about at this point. But I think it's important to understand that our purpose of acquisition at this point and our survey and our appraisal process is going forward on the basis of supporting the expanded snowmaking. No, we're going to probably be hiring a land appraiser. We need to have some third-party appraisals. That certainly, we don't need that to cover the cost of acquisition. But it's a first phase to begin the process. We need to hire appraisal firms to maybe give us the appraisals. All that information is necessary to develop a record before we actually begin negotiations.
We might end up having to condemn that, right?
Yes, but indications are now that we have to sell it, but we never know.
What do you pipe in water? Where do you pipe in water from here to here or here?
No.
The railroad track, the railroad line or the railroad Ulster County line follows up through here and is adjacent to our property at this particular location where we have the Lower Glen Reservoir, so that we will acquire the access for the railroad line from the property.
The county, we'd have to, there's also a discussion involved here with the county to get a right-of-way, either a fee title or a long-term right-of-way across their property for our piping.
What would you do in long range for if you wanted to open up a ski area eventually? You can't bring it down in here because the state wouldn't buy more property for that. You'd have to come around. Is that it? No, it's up in this area.
Yellow is state properties. The black is intensive use for Bellayre. This open is private lands. And
Where's Cathedral Brook?
Cathedral Brook is right, Cathedral Glen right in here.
So you can
develop trails in Cathedral Glen now.
I'm here now with Mr. Joe Kelly, who is the chair of the Coalition to Save Bellayre, and we've just concluded the formal part of the meeting with Commissioner Williams. There will be an informal discussion around the mountain here as they continue. Mr. Kelly, have you been pleased with the Commissioner's remarks that he made this morning and his plans for the development and continued development of Bellayre?
I would say yes. I think we've noted a definite change in the New York State administration on their attitude towards Bellayre. I think it's, as we've said before, up until this time it's been a stepchild situation. As we stated during the formal meeting, the state has spent $70 million in the North Country on Gore, primarily Whiteface and Lake Placid. This $70 million is probably it's probably 70 times on what they spent. I don't know exactly what it is, but what they've spent on Bellayre. We've become a stepchild. You can see just by looking out in the deck that we have rot on the logs on the outside. This is an end result of a long period of neglect by New York State to not only Bellayre per se, but our whole region. And we think that we're starting to see, after a massive campaign, it's not an accident that this has occurred. We've had signatures of 10,500 signatures of New York State citizens only. We did not have out-of-staters sign it. On the unit management plan, there were 266 letters sent in reaction to the unit management plan because we thought it was inadequate, unimaginative, and a band-aid for something that required a lot more than that. So the results we're seeing is we're getting correspondence from the Secretary to the Governor. Henry Williams is coming down here and paying attention to us. They do have a plan, and I think it's going to be a very good plan for as far as the unit management plan for Bellayre goes, and they're starting to recognize that the Catskills exist. The Catskills, Bellayre, is a viable part of this state. We're going to make ourselves heard, and I think it's not only the Catskills. We've succeeded with the coalition to make this area, in conjunction with the entire downstate region, that we're going to be heard, and we are going to, when they say they're going to do something like they did today, we are going to follow up. We're going to say,
What's the progress? What's going on? Where are we now, and where are we going to be a year from now? I think we've been quiet long enough. It's time for us as a group, as a coalition, as taxpayers, both in the Catskills and the downstate region, to speak up. And I think we're speaking up with one voice now. And originally there were some differences of opinion among some of the advocates of Bellayre, but now I think the coalition, the Catskills Center, the Earth Center, the Appalachian Mountain Club, the downstate legislative leaders, which are, we have Maurice Henchy and Assemblyman Cook, Assemblyman Coombe, along with, for instance, the legislatures from my area, for Senator Berman and Assemblyman Becker. Right. We're talking with one voice, and I think it's fine they're hearing it, that's all.
The commissioner, of course, has responsibility for all of the state-owned facilities, and of course the North Country being one. It seemed to me from his remarks here this morning that since his tenureship as commissioner, he's willing to look toward the future, try to lay to rest some of the frustration felt by being the stepchild, and has outlined a number of specific plans to follow. His point was that as commissioner, he can go ahead and propose a certain amount of money in the budget and then go ahead and advocate his budget as it goes before the legislature. Right. With his specific plans, I know there was some initial concern with the unit management plan, but from his remarks today, I interpreted that as being an initial draft wherein he was still willing to hear from the coalition and concerned citizens to devise that plan and make that plan more specific to the specific needs.
One thing I was going to ask him, and it passed my mind at the time, but I believe that the unit management plan is due out in September, and I think that probably a good deal of the input is already in place. What's encouraging to me is that a good deal of the action seems to be already in place also. I think that we're looking at a plan that could very well be in the process of being implemented right now. And that is the most encouraging thing, because we've had 5-year plans before, where John Johnson has planned 5-year plans, but we have never seen anything done. Like last year, $900,000 was requested, we got $500,000. And this has to be looked at in the context of not only we requested $900,000, got $500,000, but the Olympic Regional Development Authority started out with $9 million, and they're winding up with $16 million. So an aggressive plan for this facility as an all-year-round tourist attraction, if it costs $10 to $15 million, is not out of the question, because the state is spending this money in the North Country. What we want, I think what's something that the commissioner was alluding to, was that we're going to need the legislative support also on this. And we're going to need our legislators to spearhead the effort, and that's what we really want to see, because it's, you know, Maurice Henchy is the chairman of the Incon Committee of the New York State Assembly, and he's from this area. That's what we need, and that's what we need this plan to not only be devised on paper, but to push through to its completion, because it's being done elsewhere. If you go to Gore now, which came under order this year, Gore has their chairlift open this summer, which we don't have. Ours is closed. They have their new chairlift already in place. They have $500,000 for marketing purposes. We have $15,000. I mean, that's ridiculous. Al Higley said he uses that in 2 weeks, just in Al's supermarket. So we're talking about a major facility here, and we want to change the thinking.
In terms of some of the initial high priorities, given that we're looking toward the future, one of them, of course, has been the upgrading of snowmaking. And we heard today from the executive deputy director here with Commissioner Williams that, in fact, of the $500,000 allocated to snowmaking, some was specifically for a new compressor. We heard about new piping, both for air and water, necessary in snowmaking. Snowmaking, of course, is a priority. Right. We also then heard about plans for the possible development of the Pine Hill Bowl concept that the coalition has been pushing. What are other short-term or immediate high priority goals in the total development as the commission sees them?
I think the commissioner kind of hit the point better than I've ever heard it hit before. This mountain has the look of being dead, and it has had that look for 5 years. I mean, as I said before, if you look out there, the railings around are rotting. I mean, this is patchwork and put together. And I think that the perception of the mountain by the people that come here has the same perception that he had. So what we need is the is the enlivenment, or I guess that isn't the word, but we have to bring this area so that it looks like it's permanent, that this is going to be the linchpin of this area. This is the showcase. Bellayre is a $2,600 acre, $12 million facility that's already here. They've just let it go. What they have to do now, when you talk about the snowmaking they're putting in this year, it's woefully inadequate. It's what we were happy about the snowmaking last year is we got some in this year. But we're talking about 2 trails on the T-bar, which the T-bar has to really come out. What we need over there is a chairlift to the top. What we need in the Pine Hill Bowl is a chairlift going from the ridge of the mountain down into some area of Pine Hill to help that community come back and be what it was. You know, we had a lively going tourist industry here at the turn of the century. I mean, we're talking 80 years later. There's no reason why we can't do it again. And this facility here is what can do. But we need the state willing to put the kinds of investment that they're already doing, not even at the amounts that they're putting in order. We don't expect $70 million that they put in the North Country. They put $70 million into the town of North Elba, now they're starting to put it in Gore. Now, the only place New York State has not addressed is the Catskills and the downstate area, and that's right here. And we want them to address it. And we're not afraid to ask for $15 million. In $15 million, if that's what it takes to develop this area, that's what we want, because they've requested it up there, they've gotten it, and they've not only gotten it, but they doubled it.
The commissioner also mentioned directly the need for the local involvement, both on the planning level as well as the support level. Is it the plan of the coalition not only to continue to lobby for legislation as well as at the DEC, but does the coalition have plans to enter into the local political arena for such zoning, as he indicated, might be necessary should we go ahead with this kind of development?
I don't know whether that's the word to use up here. It seems like that
Planning,
in some places is
if
considered a bad word, but I think what the commissioner said is if the state is going to invest the kinds of money that they're going to invest in this area, they're going to ask for a commitment from the people of the area to assure him that if they do develop Pine Hill Lake, that you're not going to have snack bars ringing around the outside and other things that he mentioned. I think up there he was talking in relation to the work they did up in Lake Oswego, where he talked to the local planner or to the local government representatives and said that if we're going to put this money in, we don't want bait shops, snack bars, and everything ruining the land that we're trying to develop. So I think, yes, he's going to look for some commitment on the part of the local government to assure him that if the state's going to invest $10 or $15 million, they're not going to be investing in a gasoline alley type atmosphere. And I think that's something that the citizens of this area have to address themselves. I love the area. I'm a second homeowner. I've been up here almost 10 years now. You know, if I could live up here economically without, I'd probably do it, but my job is in New York City. But I think it's up to the local voters and the local people to demand that the local governments make that commitment that if we're going to get the money, then we have to do things to protect the money that the state is going to be investing, because they're not going to keep investing if they see it going down the tube. And we don't want a gasoline alley developing anyway. I think we all love it the way it is, and we'd like to keep it pretty much that way. On the other hand, though, we do need development. I think we all recognize the case of development, but development and the environment, I don't think are mutually exclusive. I think we can go forward together, or both things can go forward together and have the development and still preserve the environment.
As the coalition was forming and solicited and received those 10,500 signatures, what was your perception of the local reaction from even the non-skiers in the surrounding towns? Did you have the feeling that they were in fact avidly supporting the goals of the coalition, or did you find some reluctance to the development of the area?
No, I found total support. I think the reaction in February was shock, because as we've said at this meeting, a good portion of the people in this area depend on this area economically for 4 months out of the year to bring home the bacon. And so I think the initial reaction that I found was shock. But once you read that Legislative Committee on Expenditure Review, which came out last September, which is when I started getting heavily involved in it, the handwriting was on the wall for Bellayre. They made suppositions which weren't true, and they were going to, I had the feeling that they were going to act on them. So I don't think I was quite as shocked, but I think there was a lot of people that were shocked into reality that all of a sudden Bellayre might not be there. But if you skied here regularly, like I did and a lot of people, you could see the, you know, they were just letting it go. They weren't raising the prices. I don't even know why they didn't raise the prices, but I have a good idea. I think this place the stage was being set for abandonment, and that's what it was. And there's no question, no matter what anybody says, that it was all a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was in the budget. It was all signed, sealed, and delivered, ready to be voted on in the budget, and it was withdrawn. So the reality of this facility closing and being mothballed was the reality of February. We've come a long way since then. I think we've all come a long way, and I think it's everybody's effort. It's not the coalition. That's the reason why we called it a coalition, because we're trying to involve everybody. We're not political. We have tried very hard not to be political. We're not coming out in favor of this candidate or that candidate or this plan or that plan. What we are after is for the good of this area. That's all. That's all we're concerned about. The good of the area, the viability of the area, the attractiveness of the area, the future plans of the area, and that's what we want. And we'll work with anybody and anything that can bring that about in a nice manner.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you. I'm here with Mr. Al Higley, former state legislator from the area. Mr. Higley, your reactions to the commissioner's remarks here today.
The commissioner was very straightforward in regard to the new proposals and, shall we say, the development of the ski center. The coalition, as you know, has been working quite some time, it's just about a year now, for the continued development of this area, mainly the High Mount, Pine Hill, and Fleischman's and Margarettsville area. And I believe that we have a positive commitment from the commissioner today that we're going to move forward in that direction with the proposed buying and development of the lake in Pine Hill for additional snowmaking and additional recreation. That lake's been vacant, I think, since 1963 or 64. It's been an eyesore, but right now we feel that the commissioner has moved a giant step forward in regard to the progress of this area, and it's the first steps that we've seen in 20 years of progress in this mountain. I congratulate the commissioner, I congratulate the administration in Albany for taking a long, hard look at it, and I have to give Mr. Kelly and our coalition the credit for bringing these things to the light, because we don't know what would have happened if last January when the governor decided to put an axe to this Bellayre Ski Center. It was a frightful experience for all of us. I have got multi-millions of dollars invested in my businesses in these valleys, and I got my life and my family and my wife's family, and our livelihoods depend on it. And not only mine, it's the many other thousands of people also surround this area. But we see progress, we see development, we see growth, we see jobs, and we think with the proposal that came down today, you're going to see a new horizon here in the Catskills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Higley.
Thank you.
I'm here with Superintendent John Johnson. We have an aerial view of the Bellayre Ski Center, and Superintendent Johnson will point out some of the additional snowmaking to happen, we hope, for this ski season.
That's correct. We have contracts let out at this point in time for additional snowmaking to include the T-bar area, which has been left in natural snow conditions up to this point in time. The proposal to let a contract for purchase of electric compressors so we have permanent air on the mountain will be placed in the pump house. Looks like we're going to be getting 2 additional trails from mid-station over in that T-bar area this year.
With snowmaking?
With snowmaking, that's correct.
Now, the commissioner indicated that out of the $500,000 allocated for snowmaking, there would be new piping for both air and water. Will that have a positive impact on the snowmaking already extant here at Bellayre?
Yes, because not only are we getting the additional trails on a surface lift that could only be utilized during heavy natural snow periods, but it does a number of things for our existing equipment. We're able to utilize modern technology to become a little more proficient than what we have in the past. With the existing systems that we presently have, we should become 20% more efficient with our overall snowmaking system at this time, with that additional $500,000 impact into expansion. So what you're seeing is a little bit of there's twofold here. One is we're putting money back into the existing system so that we can continue the process of making miracles daily here at Bellayre when there isn't snow, and also expanding the system within that allocation.
With the maintenance of your present equipment, do we have a high percentage or an average percentage of downtime for the equipment, such as nozzles or compressors or anything like that? Have we been working well in that regard?
Well, it's amazing to me, someone who is so close to the business and to the industry and to this facility, the job that the maintenance crews do here at this facility, because they really literally do the impossible on a daily basis. The equipment we work with in the wintertime is in excess of 12 years old. That equipment has been rebuilt, it has been redesigned, and just about welded back together a dozen times fold, and still expecting it to produce the same product that it did 12 years ago. Our maintenance costs here are extremely high. We've got old and dilapidated equipment. We try to rehabilitate it the best we can with the funding that's given us. So again, as I say, we continue to do the impossible task on a daily basis. Those costs are high. They continue to be high until we're able to acquire those appropriations so that we can begin a replacement schedule for the new technology and the equipment that's available to the industry.
There is proposed a study for continued development or further development of the Bellayre Ski Center. What area of the map will that study take into account?
The study will take in a vast majority of those questions presented in conjunction with the unit management plan. How to best utilize Bellayre, not only as a ski center in the wintertime, but also in the summertime as well. Only a portion of that study will take into context the expansion development of ski trails. We literally have at this point a cutting of trails a little over half of what our constitutional allowance has allowed us to develop. The other appropriate area in which for possible development would be in this direction, and for the longer runs towards the village of Pine Hill. That consultant study will be directed, hopefully, to that area, in conjunction with summer activity as well.
Is that study presently underway?
No, it is not. It is a consideration for funding for, we have to appropriate funding for that type of allocation, for that sort of study, so that it gives the community a chance for input, has their chance for say, the business community as well as the skiing community as well as the environmentalists. Everybody has their chance for input on a study of this type, and this is what we need to do to consider not just one side of the coin, but all sides of the factor that's out there.
One of the considerations brought up by the roundtable discussion this morning was the increase in vertical drop on a number of trails. Is there that possibility with the half of the Bellayre area that is yet to be developed, or possibly be developed?
The possibility of trails to be developed in the bowl area would allow us to become a credible facility, ski area. We presently have awfully short runs, 600 to 800 feet. You can ride, it takes you 12 minutes to ride up the chairlift and 2 minutes to ski the trail. So your turnaround time is very limited. The excitement of development towards the east in that direction, towards the village of Pine Hill, is an exciting one because it does give us the capability to become competitive within the industry that we're surrounded here in the Catskills.
Okay. Thank you very much.